next up is Steph Locke presenting We Need DataOps Now in capital letters. Take it away, Steph.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. For me, it's 6:30 p.m. And I appreciate that. And for a lot of people, that might be the post-lunch snooze time. So I'll try and keep this interesting and hopefully keep you awake for the next half hour to an hour. So we're here today to talk about DataOps. And you might be asking whether, is that just DevOps or analytics? So that's what we're going to be kind of discussing. First of all, what is DevOps? What is the challenge that we face specifically in the data world and taking that into machine learning and data science? And then start looking at some of the more practical considerations of, okay, so if we want to do DataOps, what are the things that we need to think about? What are the cultural changes? What are the technology changes that we may potentially need to do? So, Daniel said, hi, I'm Steph. I'm an AI MVP, and at least until July. And I run a data science consultancy in the UK, and the Nightingale HQ.ai stuff you'll be seeing through, that is my startup that attempts to basically automate me out of a job and hopefully into plenty of money, which will be helping businesses adopt AI through a collaborative platform. At any point throughout this talk, do feel free to put comments into Slack and any questions that you want shared up. Be aware that if you want to make snarky comments, just put, that you don't want me to hear, at least for the next half an hour, do put "don't tell Steph" in brackets. But otherwise, I really welcome your discussion and comments throughout this, so that this talk is as collaborative as possible and useful. Okay, so DevOps originated as kind of the sweet spot of developers, operations, and quality assurance, QA, test teams working together to break down the kind of lob it over the fence attitudes that people had. So developers would end up with the phrase, "it works on my machine." Then they'd chuck it to test with minimal notes or instructions. There would be a big manual test endeavor. They would maybe find some issues. They would go back to dev. Dev would re-verify it works on their machine, chuck it back, and then once test had finally signed it off, test would lob it over the fence to ops with maybe some release notes, and ops would then have to try and deploy this out of hours and then work out how the heck they supported it. The trouble with this is that it was really slow. It took a long time to get anything done. That's really slow. And it just it frustrated everyone because nobody thought people in the other teams, whilst they were working hard, were doing the right thing. So it's kind of like agile in terms of bringing together different people who have different skill sets and trying to smooth delivery. But what they would start doing is changing fundamentally the way they worked and approached delivering software. So instead of a test team that was responsible for doing extensive manual testing, they become a center of excellence to help developers write unit tests to verify their code, build reproducible environments, and help deliver kind of end-to-end testing in a more automated way. And operations would work more closely with both the dev and the test teams to make sure that the infrastructure considerations and support considerations are taken care of from the very beginning. So it becomes very much a deployment first situation. In many respects, though, DevOps is phenomenally successful. It is a fantastic way to work. The problem is where they called it DevOps, they forgot a vast array of the organizational departments in the name. So now we see a lot of DevOps for marketing, DevSecOps, where they try and integrate security. So one of the kind of classic kind of truisms of IT is naming things is hard. The name DevOps has really made it difficult for many people to feel included and like DevOps is relevant for them. So in terms of the the proliferation of variants of DevOps, we do have DataOps, and I'm going to hopefully establish why it's valuable and also where it differs from DevOps for databases, kind of variants of the word DevOps. So one of the first areas is databases. I recently did a talk in front of sort of 75 people, and I asked them, how long does it take you to get a database change like an additional column from known need into production? Nobody answered at a time duration less than a week. Most people were at least a month. Releasing database changes is the thing that still holds up much of the rapid transition to production that DevOps is trying to achieve. And inside things like data warehousing, where developers typically never venture, it's even longer. We have far more extensive change control processes, rollback plans, out-of-hour deliveries. And it's database change is hard because we have to be inherently conservative because data loss is a super bad thing. Nobody wants to say, hey, 10 million customers, we lost your surname. We tried adding some extra characters to our column and oopsie. Nobody wants that. Database changes have to be robust, but if we're not delivering even just that extra column for at least a week, we are the bottleneck. We are the big problem. And it's things like unit testing as well. I was interviewing for a position where I was looking for a kind of a mid-level BI developer to come in and kind of work on my team. And they were doing SSIS, so extract, transform, load, data manipulation jobs. And I asked them, how do you know that it's right? And the answer given was, because my boss will tell me if there's something wrong. That really pervades much of the database development world at the moment. Of the only way we know a stored procedure is right is if a user raises a bug request, a bug ticket. So databases are still an area where we're the bottleneck. Business intelligence, how do you know your reports are right? Or at least consistently wrong across multiple reports? We really struggle with making sure that there is a single, one view of the customer. So that kind of one truth area is something we've been after for like 30 years, but still struggle with. ETL with things like SSIS is very often manually crafted and manually deployed. So again, we have delays in processes. And quite often with reports and ETL, it's very difficult to tell who put something into production, did it improve things, and what value it added. Testing in business intelligence is still mostly non-existent. We might hand over reports to UAT, user acceptance testing, and enable users to check whether it looks right. But then, if they want to test that it's right, are we putting production data into the development data warehouse? That's often a bad process. So then maybe they're testing the report on some test data, and then they can't actually verify that things look correct. So we can totally be doing more in the business intelligence space to make things quicker, smoother, and more correct output. And then in the analytics, data science, and machine learning space, how do we build predictive models that we can test whether they're right? How do you communicate to the test teams what a model, how to interpret and validate a model? It typically requires specialist knowledge. Then it gets even harder with data science because a lot of these machine learning models written in R and Python are in languages that the operations team don't know how to support. The learning, even now, kind of 3 years on after R has been available inside SQL Server, the level of knowledge of managing kind of data science workloads is still very much missing from most organizations who have SQL Server and some kind of data science team. And with models that data scientists build, they basically distill down lots of data into a simple rule of thumb. But that simple rule of thumb is based on the fact that, or based on the assumption that the past is indicative of what would happen in the future. The trouble is, as you age that data set of what's already happened, well, people change, situations change. So the longer it takes to get a model into production, the bigger the gap is between the recent past and the future, which decreases the effectiveness of models. So getting something into production quickly is super vital for the effectiveness of data science, machine learning, and AI inside an organization. So lots and lots of challenges. And this is where I see DataOps coming. We need to concern ourselves with how do we change the culture? How do we increase the collaboration and improve processes so that whether we're building databases, business intelligence components, or analytics, that we're doing these things in a way that improves everybody's life, everybody's workday, and helps get things into production more quickly and more safely so that we get more business value quickly. So that's my high-level DataOps. Any comments, rebuttals, or anything from the Slack crowd at this point?
No, nothing so far. A few jokes about don't go chasing waterfall, and Blythe is pretty curious about marketing ops because that's relevant to her. I made a joke about kids bops. The songs are the next step, but no rebuttals. There's also some kind of affirmation about if you get the data wrong in a BI application, the business people may never come back to trust that application, right? And I was saying, like, especially if you're doing someone's commissions, because I've done business intelligence relating to people's commissions, and if you get even a penny off, they start to question everything, right? Because that's their paycheck.
That's their money.
Yeah.
Was Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls Jeff Rush?
Oh, 100%. Very on brand. He knows his brand, and it's dad jokes.
Love dad jokes.
There's a billboard up on my highway where my government's promoting dad jokes. It literally says hashtag dad jokes rule and then fatherhood.gov. So thought I'll share a picture in the Slack. I kid you not, but proceed.
Okay.
There was actually a question from Dusty. How can feature flags help with DataOps?
Oh, that just came in. My bad.
Sorry, Eugene.
No, it's fine. I failed at my job.
Can you repeat the first couple of words?
So the question was, how can feature flags help with DataOps? So I think he's referring to toggling features on and off.
We will answer that question in a later slide. So just to, okay, so that's a great question. Remind me if I haven't picked it up. But that gets us into kind of the detail level. We're going to go top down first. So as I said, DataOps is reducing the divide between data roles and production. The aim is to basically safely deliver business value from data as quickly as possible. So the DataOps manifesto has principles very much like the Agile manifesto, if you've ever seen it. But it kind of goes into then a bit more detail about how we can improve, how we can actually deliver that. So the key one is continually satisfy your customer. Always be sure that what you have in production is working and relevant. This could be badly. I regularly suggest when people ask, how do people know they're using my reports, of deleting them. See how long it takes somebody to scream. But if people aren't getting value out of something, you have to ask, why do it? If people aren't happy, what is the thing you can do to make them happy? Value working analytics. So perfect is the enemy of the good. It is far better to get a simple forecast in now than it is to spend and be able to take action than it is to spend 6 months chasing a better quality forecast, because you don't get 6 months of value. You really have to be willing to change. The tech stack is regularly shifting, and some things kind of resurrect. So for a long time, I thought SSRS was dead, and now it's kind of a zombie slash shacked up inside Power BI. So situations change, things become better, things become worse. Like with Power BI going from Silverlight and £26 a month to HTML5 in less than £10. Stuff changes. We need to be willing to change the way we work and the things we use. It's a team sport. The cross-functional collaboration in making these things work, the support from operations and people with experience in automation, getting developers to contribute insight into how to test things and what unit tests are and how you can do something that involves state is really important. Communication is always key. If you don't talk to your operation, if you're a BI developer and it takes you 2 weeks to deliver, say, a new table in the data warehouse, an ETL script to go with it, and a dashboard, and you don't talk to the ops team during that, well, odds are you probably end up screwing something up. Cakes are always good. Do bring cakes and food if you can. Number 7, the reduce heroism one is really great. We typically tend to idolize the firefighter, the person who can see the big critical issue and just go, yes, I can fix that. I can save you. And they ride in, they fix it in production, and the issue goes away. But usually that issue was because of poor processes, because the person didn't take enough time to write tests or write good deployment notes. So what we should value is actually, we don't need anybody on call anymore. We've got things down. Our ETL, if there's a problem, restarts itself. We don't need to hotfix a report in production because our testing pipeline has made that report guaranteed to be correct. The person who makes the trains run on time is the person we should be valuing. So reducing heroism is a really great cultural change to make. Number 9 of analytics is code is vital. So if we treat reports and ETL packages and databases as things, then it becomes very hard to manage changes to those things and do orchestration and reproducibility. So our databases kind of become people, they become pets. We look after them. We have our favorite reports, which we deploy. We hand develop ETL packages, and we deploy them ourselves, lovingly hoping nothing goes wrong. But that is not how you scale. That is not how you make the trains run on time. So what we need to be doing is working with the underlying code. So for a database, that might be the database state, like in the database project, or it might be the migration code. It might be the XML behind the ETL package or the report. Whatever the code is, we need to treat it as code. So that means we expect higher standards, and we expect things like version control, source control on it. Reproducibility is all about, if I do the same thing, do I get the same result? So in database changes, in database changeland, you might have to write scripts as being idempotent, which is basically no matter how many times somebody runs it, it does an error. If there's a column there that was meant to be created, it doesn't drop it and add it again. It just finishes the script. In machine learning and data science, reproducibility is even more important. So how do you know you did the right thing and ended up at the right solution? That reproducibility is how we get there. Somebody else can interrogate our code, can take it on work on their machine, and actually have it happen, actually have it get the same result. Reproducibility is a really key component for me of good data science. Disposable environments means that we don't have a permanent test environment. We spin one up on demand. We don't have things work on our machines. We have clean new locations each time that looks like our production environment. Disposable environments make us always ensure there's no drift between what's in production and what we have available to us. Analytics is manufacturing. We need to think about it as a pipeline that we might build a change on our machine. It needs to go run some tests, it needs to validate, it needs to maybe get signed off through a quality control process, and then it needs to get out of the factory. It needs to get into production. So it's not a special, warm, fuzzy area. This is code. We're trying to make things robust code processes that ship automatically. Ultimately, all of this is about improving cycle times. So I tend to call this a decision loop. How quickly can somebody who needs some data, needs an action, make a decision after identifying they need to find an answer? If it's, they can open up Power BI, ask the question in a natural language query, get the answer, and make their decision, then their decision time is only only 30 seconds or whatever. If they have to ask you to make if they need some more data that isn't available in a report, and it takes you 6 months to deliver that change because it's got to go through being added to the data warehouse, being added to the ETL, incorporated into the report, then that person can't make a decision in anything less than 6 months. And businesses can really pivot on the speed of a decision. So improving how quickly we get stuff into production is key. I like to think in, and this is a very agile DevOps-y thing, in people, processes, and tools. So right now, we tend to think as technologists very much about the tools first. We ask about what's the data platform, how much RAM does it have, and things like that. Then we maybe think of the processes, and less often we think of the people, of getting a cross-functional team together, of ensuring that we've got robust mentoring processes and knowledge transfer processes so that the juniors can take over things and, we can go on holiday. So we kind of think about things the wrong way around. We think in a tool or kind of technical solution first. And really, we need to think about people first, particularly as we start making this change. So if you were listening to us before the call started, Daniel was saying he's currently quite scared by Git. So doing stuff in Visual Studio kind of works, but the process at the moment, it has ended up with a problem in the test environment, and it's taking multiple people time to kind of work out what happened and what the problem is. And that means that Daniel isn't well supported. There isn't the right level of learning and time to learn being provided. Knowledge from the people working out what's wrong with the test environment might not be transferred easily. And it's causing people a day full of stress. So we need to be thinking about how could we make sure that training happens? How do we make sure that we kind of do an after action report or kind of face to face to say, oh, this happened, let's solve it. So thinking about people first can help really improve people's enjoyment of the day and also make some of the biggest changes. Then there's processes. One of the biggest things that I try to do, which can be the hardest to achieve in many respects, is quantifying the value. Before doing something, working out what is the point. So this can be a way, I've seen when ticket volumes for a report changes start getting too much and the SSRS team has just like 6 months worth of work, that's usually when some sort of prioritization exercise gets implemented and a whole load of blockers to making it, getting things done quickly. If you're using something like a Kanban board, that can make it easier for the business to move things around and pick the things that are currently the most value. And hopefully everything can have this will help me make this type of decision in X rather than Y. If we're thinking about making changes to our solutions, continuous improvement is a key process. We always need to be measuring how long our cycle time is, how long it takes to get into production, how robust and resilient are our solutions, and always be focusing on how can we make processes better for people to deliver. And then tools. So how do we support those processes that make it easy for people to deliver value? How do we automate things? Continuous integration is basically every time somebody makes a change into the central environment, spinning up a clean room kind of thing and deploying all the changes and running the tests. So that needs a couple of things. That needs a clean room. It needs a central source control environment that things get pushed to. It needs tests, and it needs some sort of reporting. So as we go through the process of trying to deliver value more quickly, we start needing tooling that is more rigorous to support us. And that comes with a lot of change, and we need to be able to cope with that. This is my husband, Oz, currently masquerading as Winston Churchill. So Winston Churchill said, to improve is to change, to be perfect is to change often. And that is what this journey of DataOps will be all about for you. It's acknowledging that you're currently not perfect, that there is no final perfect state, but that if you keep changing and improving, that is essentially perfect. It is far better to be on an upward trajectory than it is to be static and doomed with analysis paralysis. So make a change, improve the learning. One suggestion I made earlier to a data science manager of 30 data scientists is, what if half an hour Friday morning, every person writes a how-to about something they know how to do and puts it on the company wiki. All of a sudden, you now have an extra in his case, 15 hours worth of documentation effort completed. That is an extra process that was previously undocumented. It doesn't have to be much. It can be just that half an hour, but it can make a cumulative difference that really is worth going for.
As a parenthesis, I worked on a job once where I implemented a change where if you sought the help and support of someone more senior, if you got help from someone, it was your obligation to document the problem you ran into and document what kind of fix you applied. And that way they just built up, like you said, a corporate wiki. And it was fueled by actual problems that people had run into. So that worked out really well.
Just-in-time documentation.
So, Steph, I've got a question. Kind of as you were going through that DataOps manifesto, and it may be that I've just always been doing BI the wrong way, but my experience, my career is, this is like water and oil in the sense that it seems like so often when you're doing business intelligence and you're writing reports, every report is a special snowflake that's unique and bespoke, and every business has like all of these, all right, well, how do we figure out gross margin? Well, it's, total times price, unless there's VAT tax, unless the moon's waxing gibbous on the third Thursday over Europe or whatever. And so like everything you're talking about here, you talk about manufacturing. This reminds me so much of like Six Sigma and, getting rid of defects and just beating it out of the system. But it's interesting. I mean, what are your thoughts on the fact that like so much of data and BI and analytics normally is this like these one-offs, and this stuff seems to be about standardizing, systematizing, and reducing defects?
My usual approach is nothing should be a one-off. So when people are asking for the year-to-date sales, I should be going and seeing where is my year-to-date sales measure, whether that might be in a tabular model or something, or it might be inside just a view or a stored procedure, or worst case, it is written down in the company data dictionary.
Right.
If somebody can't explicitly write down their definition, and you can't say, and it comes from this table and this table, you can't build, and they can't know that the answer, you can't build something that they know is right, and they can't know it's right without manually looking at things. It also cuts down on defects due to misunderstanding, which is usually the most common type of bug in reporting. I failed to take into account all the things you thought I needed to take into account. So at minimum, you should have a data dictionary, which is, this is how things get calculated. And worst case, you might ultimately need like a couple of columns for this is how it's calculated for sales, and this is how it's calculated for marketing.
Right.
How it's calculated for finance. But once you have those three definitions next to each other, that's when you can start making the organizational change to say, you'll need to agree to this. Which one of you is right? Why do you have the differences? What would make it so that you could use one of these other definitions?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. People in the chat are agreeing with you.
Yeah, so to kind of put it back into the people, processes, and tools.
Right.
What I'm saying is, if you haven't had a robust process which has enabled you to have a tool like Cube, then you need to write down for people what they are expecting, and then have a process for them to ratify it. And your tool might be Excel to support that process. but it changes. It's what do I need to make sure that the person and the person requesting that sales measure gets that sales measure.
All right.
So in data science at the moment, the kind of typical workflow is get, tidy some data, transform it into a data set suitable for predictive analytics. People might visualize it, or they might build a model. And if they build a model, they'll probably visualize it. And it kind of goes around in a circle through these things until people are happy and they can finally escape the clouds. But where people spend the time in the data science world is they spend a lot of time getting the data and tidying it. And then they spend a heck of a lot of time transforming it. And this is usually creating new columns like year-to-date measures, adding in a binning process to make things simple. The thing that adds the value, though, is usually the representation of the data inside a visual or the model. So there used to be a tweet of like 80% of a data scientist's time is spent wrangling data, and the other 20% is modeling. The second tweet after that kind of supersedes it for me is data scientists spend 80% of their time wrangling data and the other 20% moaning about it, about wrangling data. The value in having somebody who knows how to build predictive capabilities in a robust way is in that model bit. That transformation and getting data is not valuable. I mean, it's important for the data scientist to understand what the data represents, but it's not where the value is. So when we're doing machine learning, we need to look at how we can focus on getting the tidy data transformed already to the data scientist so that they can spend their time building the best model possible. So this is, again, where kind of having that cross-functional team and or collaboration comes in, because there are tons of qualified BI people and data engineers who can be getting data and turning it into an effective data set ready for modeling. We don't have to put someone in a corner and say, you must do all the things. So the more that we can collaborate and put in processes and tooling in to support the streamlining of the data acquisition process, will pay lots of benefit in terms of getting things into production sooner. So the old process might have been somebody raises a ticket, it goes through a prioritization process, somebody does a load of development, then somebody else does a load of test, and then somebody else does a load of release. Now it becomes better of somebody comes up with some value or an idea. So this could be a hypothesis that giving people who are most likely to leave the organization a £10 voucher will make them stay. And that idea can be fleshed out and developed. Then we build a prototype. So this might be something that shows the person whether their idea might have value. So we could look at seeing if there were previous instances where we had given people vouchers and seeing what the what the leave rate was after that. And that gives us an initial level set in terms of what might be achievable and whether something actually has value. If it works out that the data might not be there, or it doesn't look like it's going to be predictive enough or not valuable enough, by that point, we've only spent kind of 2/5 of the time that we would have spent getting something prioritized, developed, and into production. So we have a net save, and now we don't have something else in production that doesn't add value, but somebody has to maintain. That makes further change harder. So that prototype is cutting down work short term and fundamentally cutting down on work long term. Once we say yay or nay for it, then we can do dev and test. And the idea is that we should be, in terms of people and processes, trying to optimize for maintainable, reproducible solutions. So as I build a dashboard and I need to do that year-to-date sales figure, I might think, how can I put in a test that means somebody else doesn't have to manually check it? So I could have, if I've got a user-defined function in the SQL Server, I could have a unit test for it, so I can actually test it in the database. I can make that change there. Or if that's not feasible, I could actually write effectively a unit test inside my report. I could have a tab called checks, and I could write a manual version of the year-to-date sales calculation and compare that value to the one that was calculated in the database. And if they succeed, it gets like a little tick on the main dashboard. And if there's a problem, it gets across and somebody can look into it. So as the developer, I can be putting in improvements that mean that I can be certain that the work that goes on to the next phase is quality work. Particularly at the beginning, we will still probably have quite a long test cycle, but as we start building our tests into our solutions, whether they're databases, BI, or analytics, it becomes easier and your code becomes more trustworthy. And so less dedicated test resource is needed, and less user time is needed to verify something is fit for production. And then we can spend the time shipping it into production, monitoring it, and making sure it's adding value. So we can change the way we work and be far more experimental by using prototypes and more value-oriented by focusing on getting things into production in a robust way. And now my husband Oz is masquerading as the Rock, definitely a step up from Winston Churchill. It's never about how you start, it's always about how you finish. Truly, this is a journey. We need these things now because it would be fantastic if everything worked smoothly and you could just almost have a user write their ticket in such a way or tick something or get a bot that talks on the ticket and it adds the column to the database and it goes into the shadow table, into the metadata driven ETL and then all just goes into production. That's the dream, but we first of all have to start taking the steps towards it. So we need DataOps now because right now things suck. It's not fun for us to be next, trying to get things to align in SSRS or SSIS. We want to be doing more fun, more valuable things. So that's why we really need to start making these changes. But it is totally a journey. And I'm very sorry about my nose. Okay, so some reading recommendations for you. The Phoenix Project is a fantastic book. Even if I haven't convinced you about DataOps, you should read. You will identify people from your team, your office, people who you've previously worked for, who are in this book. Did I hear somebody want to chime in about how awesome the Phoenix Project is?
Oh, it's great. Like, it's funny. DevOps never really clicked for me, and I read the book like 2 months ago, and I thought it was going to be this trite parable, kind of like the 5 dysfunctions of a team, where it felt kind of artificial. And literally the first chapter, I'm like, oh no, this is IT purgatory, and I'm getting flashbacks from my last job. Why is the time tracking system in Access? Right, that kind of stuff. But for me, it not only helped me understand the idea of DevOps and understand Anthony's presentation earlier today about Kubernetes and containers, but it changed how I think about work. Because now that I'm, freelance, I have to start thinking about capacity and start thinking of myself as this little factory of one. So even if you never plan to do DevOps and you plan to work on old-fashioned on-prem SQL Servers for the rest of your life, the Phoenix Project still may be helpful in just your day-to-day work or how you think about work and how it flows in your organization. So total recommend. And there's an audiobook, so you don't even have to read it. Very well done.
Yeah. Agile Data Warehouse Design is another great book that's very practically oriented around how do you approach data warehouse design so it is not a ginormous waterfall project. Because data warehouses, like I worked in an organization where they were going to do a new data warehouse, and basically all BAU, all new stuff stopped for like 8 months whilst they were building this thing that was ostensibly better. And that is not a great way to do things. So Agile Data Warehouse Design it helped me when I went into a startup along with anchor modeling, which I'll cover briefly later. It enabled me to be building and incrementing my data warehouse every 2 hours. And I was regularly doing just-in-time design to be able to get things that added value. So if somebody needed a report and we didn't have the data in the data warehouse, at the beginning of the day, I'd be doing the requirements gathering. I'd work out where the data was in the source systems, add the info to the metadata solution. It would drop into the database structure and the ETL whenever the next 2-hour job kicked off. And then I'd be able to build a report on it so I could get the end-to-end business intelligence process done in a day and still be working on my data science stuff. So Agile Data Warehouse Design was key in that for helping me think better about gathering requirements. And then the DataOps Manifesto, it's a good read. So when you're starting out with collaboration and trying to get more cross-functional and increase your communication with people, it sounds odd, but Azure can really help. So Azure as a cloud platform has really nice controls for enabling different people to be able to see and work on different resources. So it's no longer having to go ask the Oracle scary DBA in the corner what the state of the database is, or can we pretty please have another database? It allows a more self-service, sensible environment for people to work in. It's now called Azure DevOps. I've had to change this 3 times now, but you need source control. And you need solutions that help you get stuff into production sooner. Azure DevOps is totally a good way to do that. If you worked with like TFS and MS Build like in 2013, this is not the same animal. This is far easier, far quicker to get value out of. Trello is a good way for managing a Kanban board. So I said it earlier and I should have explained. A Kanban board is basically, usually at its simplest, 3 columns: to do, doing, done. You set a limit on how many things can be in the doing column, and your to-do list is prioritized with the most important, urgent stuff at the top. So you would pick in the morning, you would go, okay, these are my 2 tasks that I'm still doing. I'm going to finish those off, chuck them into the done column, and then pick a new task or up to 3 tasks and bring them into my into my doing column. And, so one of the things that we were just talking about with the Phoenix project is it teaches you to think about throughput. So, and this was something that came up the other day for me with an executive mindset coach. Thankfully, I wasn't paying him, but he was very insightful anyway, of we don't feel overwhelmed when there's lots of work to do. We feel overwhelmed when we feel like we're not getting enough work done. By getting things into that done column, even if you have to serialize tasks so you never try and do 2 things at once, you will feel substantially better than having 15 in progress tasks that are really hard to shift. If you're in that situation where you have 15 tasks in progress, perhaps you could break them down into smaller tasks so that the ones that you haven't done yet that are basically blocked by somebody else can just go back in the to-do column. If you can't split things up and you're doing 15 things, then you need to work down that debt. Or just say, you know, this has been in my doing list for like 6 months and nobody's chased me on it. Do I still need to be doing it? Crossing things off the list and essentially archiving them is a valid strategy. But reducing how many things you accept to do at once is great for feeling better, and it is a lesson I am constantly relearning. Particularly if you've seen people doing DevOps and Agile, whiteboards and Post-its are really great, tangible ways for you to work with the prioritization. There's a great technique called event storming, which is about mapping the actions, the events that happen through a process. And once you've mapped out those events, you can then start thinking about how to optimize that process. So Post-its and whiteboards become pretty crucial. And then finally, you want something like Slack or Teams, because big emails are frustrating. They take a long time for people to acknowledge and answer. And if you work in an organization where there's lots of people or where lots of people are remote, then you want that asynchronous communication that is widespread. So do think about how you can talk to each other more easily. And hey, most of you are on Slack making jokes about DataOps, so you're already on your way there. I wanted to, oh wow. Okay, so I have a few tables here of kind of my opinion on, because I can't change our techie attitudes, tools first approach in a day. So some of the things that you might look at improving your database workflows, SQL Server data tools, very well worth investing in, and it's free. Redgate DLM can really help. Anchor modeling is 6 normal form databases, and that is a free solution. The tooling is now a bit better, and the learning is fairly high, but it is fantastic for always online, additive only, idempotent changes. So it's great for a rapidly evolving, high release frequency database. Getting things in, continuously integrating and deploying into production uses MS Build / now Azure pipelines, or whatever they're calling it today. That has a fair amount of tooling for it. Go look at that. Cosmos DB is a document store as kind of its core engine. That is really great. We're using that in Nightingale at the moment, and it means we're able to implement application and data changes anytime we ship an application change. We've got that for ETL and reporting, cubes. These days, friends don't let friends use MDX, data science components. So those are kind of rounding off some of the tools as kind of a reference for you for if you're thinking about making a change that involves improving your tools. Those are great kind of some reference starters to help you work out what that answer might be. So thank you all very much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Steph.
Mm-hmm.